I hear them talking about how they're going to have to abandon their vehicles and try to find shelter, about how they can't get out of where they're at, and there was citizens calling for a fire engine or calling for an airdrop because they were trapped, and the response back is, there are no more resources. We don't have any resources. It was like hell on earth.
County 13 is bad. Hey guys! Walk towards the left.
We're seeing a lot of chatter about this fire up there, and winds howling that day. So it has the potential to be really bad, but you know, fires happen up here. You're used to fires. Not knowing how bad it was, we went up there. And I stopped at a shelter, and I'll never forget, there was a guy there who said that he thinks this is probably the worst fire in California history. And I was like, no way, no way. I mean, there's not gonna be worse than the Tubbs fire, you know?
We came in through the backside on Pence, so it looked pretty big, but we didn't really know the magnitude when we were going up there.
Immediately, once we get into town, I mean, everywhere you go is on fire. You can't really see anything. I mean, you can't even see the next hillside, but you could just tell that right away that this was chaos trying to get out. You would see cars on the side of the road that had been burned over.
It was like a movie set, like where cars are crashed into poles, cars are crashed against each other, they're crushed.
I knew it was bad when I saw a CHP cruiser with its airbags deployed, just sitting there in this canyon with a bunch of burned cars all around it. Bulldozer tracks going through the middle of the road where they had actually pushed the cars off to make room to get people out.
Paradise was such a limited and difficult place to get out of. There's only 4 main arteries out of the town, and because the fire moved so fast, it forced so many people onto the roads and they couldn't get out.
That's the sign for Paradise.
It's the Welcome to Paradise sign.
A stream of cars that were coming out of Chico. It was bumper to bumper traffic.
Unless you lived through it, it's hard to imagine. You have to figure out, well, how do we effectively evacuate a zone, keeping in mind that if you just tell everybody to get out at one time, you have this scenario where you have this mass evacuation, you clog up the roadways.
Fires like that kind of create their own weather systems. And so it's just pushing itself, and then it'll toss an ember a mile out in front. Another fire will start off, will start a mile in front of the main fire, and it'll just suck the main fire to that one, and it'll just like keep growing and growing and growing that way until it's just an out of control monster.
And the stories that people told were of embers blowing sideways like snow. And that's incredible. I don't know how you can get in front of that.
And I think it's important to put it in the context of how rapidly this fire was developing. It almost felt as though this fire was outrunning us before we even knew we were in a race. I think we would have had to have a fire engine on every corner and a couple of cops on every corner to keep that from happening. There are some catastrophes that just outpace the resources and infrastructure that you have.
Once we started fanning out the next couple of days and seeing the destruction and finally hearing from the first responders, it was bad. It was really bad. What I was telling everybody was that homes that are standing are the exception. That's what I saw over the days that I was up there. Homes and buildings that are standing are the exception.
It burned through so fast that you can see on the tree line, it goes up 20 feet through the trees. All the trees are still standing, but the fire went through so fast that the trees made it and the houses are gone.
Well, I covered the Tubbs fire in Santa Rosa and the Atlas fire in Napa, which are on CAL FIRE's list of deadliest fires in California, and those paled in comparison to the Camp Fire.
you're driving around and you're seeing a lot of retirement places, a lot of places where they take care of senior citizens. And to me, that really hit me hard because I know that there was a lot of elderly people that lived out there. And as it turned out, the majority of the people that died were seniors.
It's just miles and miles of devastation like I've never seen before. You just drive past all these scenes like a bomb had dropped in the area. And the other thing that struck me when I was driving through the scene was that all that was left of homes were chimneys. That was it, basically. Everything else had been incinerated.
It's not uncommon for a fire to move through a neighborhood and kind of, you know, skip between houses, and some will be still standing and others totally gone. In the case of the Camp Fire, when I went up Skyway for the first time early Friday morning, the town was gone. And I had to tell every single person whose home that I checked on that their house was gone.
The devastation was just absolute. And we've never seen that where a town this size, a town of 26,000 people, had been burned to the ground.
So in the Pine Springs mobile home, I was in there and I had shot several photographs and I saw this one building that was still standing. And then a few days later, I was put in touch with actually a woman who had survived in that shelter for 2 days with her cat. Feeling better? Aww.
Cheryl Valente saved her own life. She got left behind in the evacuation. She didn't know that she was supposed to evacuate.
I thought I had some time, and I didn't. I looked up and saw that my neighbor across the street was on fire.
And then when the fire was right outside her front window, her car wouldn't start.
So I took it on foot.
And she dropped everything else and saved her cat.
Carrying her was really rough, but I wasn't going to let go.
And she literally said she was running from this tornado of fire with her cat for 8 hours.
We hid behind rocks, we hid behind a bench, we hid behind cars. I was watching the fire as it moved, and as it moved, we moved. There's a few mobiles standing, and then the room that I took refuge in, it was standing.
She got inside the shelter, she ripped the drapes off of the window so that she could stay warm, and they both drank water out of a little plastic container for 2 days.
And emergency vehicles going by couldn't hear my screams. I kept going outside, help, help.
And nobody heard her, till finally her son contacted the police and they found her there.
I caught up with his car and knocked on his window and said, I'm the one you're looking for, I believe.
I think a lot of those pets saved their owners' lives because all she could talk about was her cat and how she wanted to save that cat.
I would just like to say to the Sheriff's Department of Paradise, thank you so much for saving me. And I'm so grateful that you did and that you found me because you saved my cat too.
I'll get you home. We'll get you to the shelter. Come on. You'll be okay. I ended up finding a badly burned cat underneath the car, and I shimmied under the car and got this cat out, and I posted it on social media. And the owners actually saw the picture and were able to get the cat. And yeah, it felt good to be able to rescue this cat, and it sounds like she's made a full recovery.
The pets are really important. And the fact that the shelters, some of them can accommodate some of the pets, that was a big deal. A family isn't just a family, but a family includes pets too.
This is my place in Old Magalia, what's left of it. I really never thought in my wildest dreams that there would be nothing left. That is a monster fire. Everybody's feeling, loss and everything, grief, and, where are we? Why are we here? This is not a place to live. It's not for me or anybody really, but it's a place to be, to, meet your needs every day.
I mean, they've lost everything. They've lost their sense of identity. They don't have their license. They have no way of showing who they even are.
The most difficult part is just being able to listening to people's stories.
The flames were engulfing our car on both sides, and even where you look out the windshield, my girlfriend Susan Style, who's taking care of me, she saved my life. She jumped out of the car with a coat hanger and put the fire out because all the pine needles were on fire. And then on my side, it was all melting. But we kept saying, we don't want to die, dear Jesus, and because we really thought we were going to.
Oh man, I'd give anything for my old beat up couch right now and my cat. It was like the first day of the fire, it was packed. Then the next few days, people started leaving. The people that left first, I think, were the ones that had money, and then the ones that had relatives, and then the ones that could find someplace to go and had, and had a car. And now what's left is like the poorest of the poor. It's like we're homeless encampment, which is exactly what we are. We're the new homeless.
Walleywood was a truly interesting place. Another aspect that made the campfire exceptional was the fact that Walleywood kind of cropped up.
It's for the roof.
It was this weird mix of just people trying to do right by each other. There was an amazing outpouring of charity there. I think Walleywood was also where a lot of people who were most adversely affected by this fire ended up. They didn't have the resources, the kind of social capital that a lot of other people have to fall back on. They didn't have family to stay with. They didn't have reliable transportation, so Walleywood was a logical place to go.
Come on, sweetie. Let's go get mommy.
Yay! I did lose my wedding ring. That's the only thing I lost, and it's the only thing I cared about. So, even if I find a plastic one, that'll be fine. But yeah, it's the only thing Sorry.
Oh. And it was like a $25 wedding ring that her husband had given her. But the second she remembered that she'd lost that, because it had flung off her hand while she was trying to get her kids in the car, the second she remembered that, she started tearing up, and she said that that was the first time that she'd actually let herself cry.
Wow, just over my wedding.
I always said to my grandma, they'll never let the fire get to us, we'll always be safe. And if the fire does get up here, Paradise is pretty much gone, and at that point, we can decide what to do. But I really never believed that it would come up as high as it did, or eat an entire town. The whole town is gone. I still don't know how to process that. Put it on the fire. I think it still hasn't hit me entirely, that everything is gone. But it does help to know that there are people who care and that there is some help out there.
This scale of loss means that there's a huge scale of a response.
Hey, you don't have any more masks.
Were those closed?
No, I have one more.
This population that has higher medical needs and less ability to flee so quickly, this is where you see an urgent need and something that's kind of different from the other disasters that I've responded to. It's not easy to be the person that's facing that trauma head-on with these survivors and the victims, but it is 100% worth it.
I lost my house in Paradise, and a lot of my friends' houses were lost. I'm really sad. Yeah. I'm sad for my community, but there's hope.
There's these stories of these bulldozer operators. My grandpa used to drive one of these things, right? Just imagine driving into a fire on something that has a max speed of about you walking. And plowing through cars and doing, there's just all kinds of neat stories of those folks helping, getting cars out of the way so that people can get through, people loading up people into the back of their pickup trucks to go get them out of there, or the guy who Toyota bought him a new car, a new pickup, because he'd burned the sides of it, making multiple trips back and forth. These things are terrible, but they also kind of show the best of what what we can do for each other.
And what I've learned is, it renewed my faith in humanity.
You definitely see that there is a sense of a community among people that never knew each other before.
I have never seen Chico and Magalia and Paradise come together like this. Just like it's a gigantic family right now. I feel safe, I feel cozy, I feel blessed.
At this point, we're just walking from the looks of it. We'll get all the gear gathered up and we'll head over.
There have been search and rescue teams at other fires, but this was 500 search and rescue members, nearly all of whom, by the way, are volunteers. I was talking to a sergeant from the El Dorado team, the one law enforcement officer, the one staff guy who is running this crew, and he said, this is the height of character. I mean, the character that people show is just incredible. They're volunteers, retired high school principals, full-time moms, SMUD engineers, and weekend warriors, basically men and women who spend their weekend in the Sierra backpacking and hunting and fishing, so they've got this skill set, and normally they will go out and try to find a missing hiker or a missing hunter. Here, they're going out knowing they're looking for the remains of people who have been killed by this wildfire. It's very meticulous. I was with one group where they were going through a large mobile home park, and all of the the tin roofs on these mobile homes had collapsed, and so they were going one by one and lifting up the roofs of these mobile homes. And then some of it, frankly, seemed like luck because there's just so much ash and debris. Maybe there's the springs of a box spring from a bed. So you start looking there because if it's an elderly resident, you think, oh, maybe they didn't get out of bed. You go toward the front of the house near the door. Okay, that's where you work from there. Did they try to get out of the house? And you just look for those kinds of clues, and often that's where you're finding these people. These search and rescue teams went to these homes knowing that the people probably didn't make it. And so it's not like there's a shock element to it. And so from their perspective, they're trying to find closure. Hopefully the family who is losing this loved one, now they can rest peacefully knowing that their loved one has been found.
And I got a turkey in here. This morning I broke down before I took a shower and I started crying and everything because I want to go home. I want my own house, I want my own kitchen. But you know what, I'm so grateful that I'm not in a tent or somewhere else. 10 years ago we lost our home in the fire. So this is the second time in 10 years.
It's a real nice house. I loved it. I got to design the inside myself. I was really happy there.
He has plans for the house his mobile home that burned down. So he's basically said, well, I'm just going to take it to a place where they can manufacture this and they'll do it all over again. His sister wasn't that way. I think she wants to move out. But it was pretty amazing to see how thankful they were to be together, that they were all alive.
Because we feel very displaced and lost, but I'm trying to keep it together for my grandkids and for my brother and for my son. So we have some kind of tradition still going so we don't lose that family. And that's what's important to me, for my family to be together. So that's why I'm trying to do this.
It's an interesting thing in a fire because you are going to talk to somebody at arguably one of the worst moments of their life. And I had a moment actually when I started letting people back into Paradise. There was an older couple, they were in their early 60s. Their house, their garage, 2 garages in fact, and their home were completely leveled.
It's gone.
I walked up to the woman and she looked at me and she just burst into tears. And she said, I'm sorry. And I said, no, I'm sorry, I'm just a reporter. And I just kind of gave her a hug because she didn't know who I was, and she just saw somebody and she just burst into tears and she said, I knew it was gone, but now I've seen it. And
we thought there'd be a few things salvageable, but there's really not. There's nothing. There was maybe a few things.
They, like a lot of people, they loved the natural setting of Paradise. It was a beautiful town. It was pine, majestic pine trees everywhere on the streets, just surrounded by mountains.
This is his shop with his cars in it, welders, everything he owns. I mean, I suppose we'll, get it back.
they're sifting through the ash, and every once in a while, they found her coffee mug with her name on it. And then she had a penny collection, and she found a big mound of pennies kind of melted together. And then like a random plate, a charred old typewriter that she had, that kind of thing.
Yeah, this is where he spent a lot of his time.
Yeah.
Making things for me out of wood.
It's just amazing what the fire takes and what it doesn't, because their next door neighbor's house survived. And their house was gone, and so was every other house on the block.
Like I say, it's just things, so we're fine. I really can't see anything of value.
When something like this happens, how it puts things in perspective to people about what really matters. And, yes, you can have a really nice car. Yes, you can have a really nice house. But if that survives and your loved one doesn't, you'll never be able to replace that loved one.
It's kind of nice not having something anymore, like otherwise these had control of us. Now we have nothing. We're free. We're free.
For many of the people, especially in Paradise, as we've learned, the victims were elderly, and it's a town that had a lot of retirees. Not that it's easy for anyone to rebuild their lives, but if you're 55 years old, 60 years old, I mean, man, how do you rebuild from that?
No, I'm afraid there's nothing left worth picking up. I already registered and received the money, but it's nowhere near enough. I can't move, I can't buy anything, I can't rent anything.
And she said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm an 84-year-old woman with 4 cats and 1 dog. Nobody wants to rent me. So she's basically saying that she's going to become homeless.
I love this place. I love it. I thought, that I would end my days here, but now I think I'm going to be in the streets somewhere. I just don't know.
Really like this area. And I'm not leaving. I'm not going to leave Magalia. But it might take a while to rebuild, of course. Rome wasn't built in a day.
I've got people here in Paradise who, because there's such a lack of housing, they're looking at either leaving and never returning to Paradise again, never returning to Butte County again, possibly never returning to Northern California again because of the lack of housing. If they stick it out, maybe they're with a relative in some apartment, in Red Bluff or possibly in Chico. Even as likely, they're spending 2 years in a FEMA trailer, while their home gets rebuilt.
I think there's a lot of people that are uncertain about where they're going to be at. Got some people that are like, well, we're Paradise strong and we're going to come back and we're going to rebuild.
Paradise is such a community and it's so strong with one another that we can't imagine living anywhere else.
I was the happiest I'd ever been, was in this home. We're gonna rebuild and it's gonna be better than ever. And we were here when the community wasn't that big and we watched it grow, and we'll be here when it grows again. So
there's other people that said they're never coming back. I know that on one of the days when I went in, I talked to a nurse that survived the fire with her husband.
We're trying to find her. We've been calling out for her. Okay. There's a pretty horrific YouTube video out of people that are dead on my road.
I think probably for some of those people that literally saw hell on earth, they're like, yeah, I'm not coming back.
I don't think I can go back. I mean, I don't know if my neighbors got out, so I don't think so.
The whole town is gone. So people who had jobs up there, those jobs are gone. And years is a long way to wait to try to rebuild your life.
I think going forward, it's important to think about what an evacuation of that scale asks of a city's infrastructure.
Tens of thousands of people were able to get out of that. So I think you can always learn from a situation, but there were a lot of things that went as right as they could have gone under the unprecedented incident.
A significant portion of their population were older senior citizens, retired. A significant number of them had disabilities. I think that needs to be factored into evacuation plans and disaster plans ahead of time.
If California history has taught us anything, Paradise will rebuild. The question that I'm asking is, should it? because now this is the third fire just in the last 10 years.
After 40, almost 50 years, it'll take more than a fire to get rid of us.
They rebuilt San Francisco after the 06 quake. They rebuilt the Oakland Hills. They've rebuilt places in Southern California where there have been fires. That's just kind of who we are as Californians. We accept that we live in places where there are earthquakes and mudslides and floods and drought and wildfire, and we just keep building in these places. And when it comes to wildfire, we're building more and more in these places.
Fires can happen really, really fast, and it used to be that we would think, oh, fires only happen out in the woods and they'll never come to us. But I mean, as we've seen the last couple of years, I mean, it can hit anybody, and it can come from the forest all the way to the ocean side.
I don't know how they could rebuild in any way to prevent something like this from happening again, short of building cinder block homes and cutting down all the trees, which is obviously not going to happen. And so we'll see over the next few years to what extent they rebuild and how they rebuild.
It's going to be a risk of something no matter where you go. It's going to be fire, flood, anything. And no matter where you live, there's always going to be a risk somewhere. So if you love the town, you're going to stay.
Thank you.